Yeah, thank you very much. The topic on which we're talking here this morning, it's actually a very important topic, because 1 in 5 persons living in Europe today are either foreign-born or native-born with at least one immigrant parent. And obviously, there's a lot of focus right now on refugees, and we have seen the different programs, but clearly the challenge of integration goes well beyond that. If we want to succeed the integration front, getting them into jobs is really key. And key for getting them into jobs, obviously, are employers, are you, and your businesses behind the charters. Because clearly, when you don't have employers providing those jobs, labor market integration cannot work. So at the OECD, we have done a lot of effort in recent years to have a closer ear on the employers, to really hear what are your concerns, what are the solutions you would like to have. And one concrete outcome of that, which we're preparing right now, jointly with our colleagues from the UNHCR, is actually an action plan on engaging with employers and refugee labor market integration. And a lot of the issues that we have heard now are going to be taken up and be brought to the political and international level. It's supposed to be coming into the Global Compact on Migration to be an important element of this, precisely including engagement with co-workers, very important. How do you provide this matching and these kind of challenges? But let me take a step back and look more broadly at how are our countries faring today with respect to the labor market integration of migrants. And I'm sorry, we were told not to do any PPTs. It will be just 3 slides, I promise. But you know, you cannot have the OECD without presenting charts. It's like being in Estonia and not having internet access. I will show you some of this work, which is actually a product of a cooperation with the European Commission. In the past, we've done a lot of work, and right now we're doing a lot of work with DG Employment and DG Home on the integration issues, and we look forward to work also more closely with DG Justice on the broader issues of diversity and fighting against discrimination. And so I'd like to take this opportunity also to thank the European Commission and the Estonian hosts for inviting us today and to share our views on these issues. So this is actually one of these graphs on which I could talk 1 hour, because it tells you the history of migration to OECD countries, just this line. What do we have here? We have the differences in the employment rates between immigrants and the native-born by education level, and now we see the low-educated, okay? So what you see is that on average, across the OECD and the EU, actually in the EU on average, so the pointer doesn't work, that's good to know. On average across the EU, actually the low-educated migrants are doing slightly better in terms of labor market integration, if you look at employment rates, than the low-educated native-borns, if you just look at by education level, right? But there's clearly some exceptions here, and there's a large diversity. You see at the bottom end, countries like the Netherlands, Denmark, and Sweden, and also Estonia. But I must say that a lot of the Central and Eastern European countries, because they have quite old immigrant populations, sometimes, as we've heard earlier on, they have very specific issues, so I wouldn't focus too much on these specific results. And on the other hand, you have countries like Spain, Greece, Italy, and on top the United States, where actually they have much better outcomes, the low-educated. So what's behind those results? It's actually the composition of past migrant inflows. Those at the bottom end, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, for example, they had a lot of refugees and family migrants, which obviously have more challenges, as we've just heard. And those on the right end, they've had a lot of low-skilled labor migration. Obviously, these people have arrived with jobs. Now there's the issue of long-term employability with the crisis, a lot of challenges, but still they have better outcomes than the low-educated native-born peers. And when you now look at the high-educated, you see that. You see the dots are below the line virtually everywhere, including in the lands of golden opportunities like Canada, Australia. So every country faces challenges in valuing the skills of migrants. So what's behind that? Clearly, there's a very large discount on the labor market of migrants' foreign skills foreign labor market experience, foreign qualifications, because employers have difficulties in value and judging what's the value of a degree from Syria, from Morocco, or from Pakistan or India. And obviously the issue of language is also a very important one, as we have just heard. And what's more, when these highly skilled individuals are getting jobs, then we see this results. Okay, I'm sorry, this is your test whether you've taken enough coffee this morning. You see the red lines are the overqualification rates for the foreign-born who have been trained abroad. Okay, they have a foreign education, and overqualification meaning you're working in a job below your formal education level. And you see pretty high incidence everywhere, much higher than the diamonds, which is a native-born. When you've been trained in the country, actually, you're doing much better. So a lot of those disadvantages that we see are actually stemming not from your origin, they are stemming from the fact that employers have difficulties in valuing and in judging those kind of foreign qualifications and work experience. Because employers hate uncertainty. And large employers, as we're having here today, they can afford to take the risk, if I may say so, of hiring a few and hoping some may be super productive, others may be less, and on average it will be a gain. For a small employer, having somebody on board, if you just have 10 employees and you need one, and you're not sure that person's going to be good, you're not going to be taking that risk. So I think a lot of those integration issues, we must actually think them also from the perspective of small and medium-sized companies, because these are actually facing the big challenges. They don't have the big HR programs. They hardly have this CSR type of activities that the big companies are having. And for them, taking one potentially low productive worker is a risk to their business. So they also tend to discriminate more, for example, as we have seen by some evidence. What's more, so these are migrants themselves. What's actually astonishing in the work that we have been doing, that even the highly skilled native-born children of immigrants tend to face disadvantages in the labor market. So here, obviously, you cannot talk about uncertainty anymore. I mean, these guys have been raised and educated in the host countries, and they still struggle. So it cannot be something related to their qualifications or language issues, because, I mean, we're talking about highly skilled people raised and educated in the host countries. So there must be other things behind that. And actually, there's 3 candidates. And we have heard from 2 of those actually already. The one is the issue of networks. It's very clear for new arrivals, they don't have the networks. But since the parents often didn't have good jobs or didn't have networks, the children also don't have these kind of networks. And we know that depending on the country, between 1 in 3 and 2 in 3 jobs actually involve these kind of informal networks. And an informal network may just be, oh, you have those kind of qualifications, go to Siemens. That's, and I tell you where you have to send it. That doesn't mean that I get you the job, but I give you that precise hint to whom you should send your application, and that for your profile, you may have a good employer there. That's a big issue. The second, also we've heard about it, the knowledge about labor market functioning. I mean, like, how do you write a CV? How do you perform in a recruitment interview? And all that is highly country-specific. I'm a German living in France, and I can tell you already that it's quite different in France what you write in a motivation letter and in a CV, and how you judge yourself in a CV, than in Germany. I always say this joke. I'm sorry for the French colleagues, désolé. When I have French interns, and in France, you tend to be more assertive of your language skills sometimes. So you often people, when they write allemand bon niveau, then I think I can talk to them in German. They have good German knowledge. So I talk to them in German, and I said, désolé. And in other countries, you would probably write basic knowledge. So it's highly context specific of what you write in your CV, how do you draft a motivation letter, and so on. And then thirdly, obviously, it's not only networks and knowledge about labor market functioning, but it's also the issue of discrimination, obviously. And actually, the incidence of discrimination is much higher than what people may think. We know from testing results that it's not uncommon for persons with an immigrant-sounding name to have to write 4 to 5 times as many applications to get invited to a job interview as somebody who has a native-sounding name, but otherwise pretty much the same CV. So it's a huge issue. And here's some work that we've been doing with the Commission by people who were asked whether they have been discriminated in the labor market. So that's self-perception. It's nothing to do with real incidents, it's self-perception, but it tells us a lot about social cohesion. So what do we have here? The question was posed slightly differently across countries, so I would not so much look at level differences across countries, but rather at what I'm going to show you in a minute. You can look at different groups within the same countries. So first of all, you have pretty significant percentages across all countries of immigrants themselves who report that they have been discriminated against, including in the countries where you generally would expect less, like Canada. Pretty high shares report that. What's interesting now, when you ask the native-born children of immigrants the same question in the same country, and then actually you see that in a lot of European countries, actually the children of immigrants are more likely to say that they think that they're discriminated against. And you see the opposite in the settlement countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So what's behind that? What's behind it is that I think it's a sign of social cohesion. The native-born children of migrants are much more aware of the issue of discrimination than their parents were. They were accepting a lot of things that the children no longer accept. And in countries like Canada, they're also more part of society than in many European countries. So there's still a way to go. So if you look at all those challenges in terms of integration, actually, it's surprising, the picture that we saw earlier on, it looks much better, the outcomes, than you would think, considering all those challenges that migrants have to face. So why is that the case? Why is the picture not as gloomy as public opinion makes us think, and as we would have expected, even given all those challenges? Well, I think that's very important to stress. We cannot stress that enough in the public debate. It is because migrants are often willing to go the extra miles. We know from several surveys that migrants write much more applications for jobs. They have high motivation. We know that very well. And actually, we have done earlier this year, and I'm getting too close, a survey with among German employers, jointly with the German Chamber of Commerce, regarding their experience with refugees. We asked 2,200 employers. And it actually mirrors very closely to what Jörg has said. 80% of those who had experience with refugees said actually they were super happy with those. 80%. Obviously, there were some issues, but 75% of employers also said when we had issues, it was generally minor issues or very few issues that it was issues with which we could deal easy. So that's not just anecdotal evidence. That's a pretty solid based on 2,200 experiences in Germany. So if we know all of that, then clearly we know that there's a lot more potential in migrants and their children. A lot of them are already well integrated, but there's a lot more potential out there that can be tapped in. And we at the OECD, we look forward to working together with the Commission and you to find ways and to discuss of how businesses can better tap into that potential. And so I look very much forward to the little time that we have left for discussion today. During the break, my colleague Eva, who is also in charge of a forum that we are doing at the OECD, to which you kindly invited on the 22nd of January, the International Diversity Forum, where we also hope to have an exchange between policymakers and businesses on this issue. And you're all kindly invited. So thank you very much.